So thanks everyone for joining us this morning. Those of you who are regulars to this session will remember that the way we run these kind of workshops, they're designed to be workshops rather than just webinars. So we'll do it in 3 sections. So I'll start just by sharing some kind of key principles and insights. And we're looking this morning at how we develop a growth mindset, not just for us, but as importantly, and sometimes more importantly, for our teams that we work with. And we'll talk about some principles around growth mindset and how we can start to help shape different conversations with our teams that get them focused on the right outcomes, perhaps being more positive, looking at opportunity and possibility, rather than often with people, it's the default is to look at obstacles and barriers. So how do we start to shift and change that? And then the second part of the session will be a breakout discussion. So I'll give you a chance just to talk as a group about what this might mean for you in your business, and just kind of share some ideas and best practice. Then we'll reconvene together as a wider group, and we'll just take some feedback on what you discussed and what that means for your business. And then we will wrap up and close, and we'll finish somewhere between 10 to and 5 to 10, so that you've got your 5 to 10 minutes between this meeting and the next meeting, because most of us have back-to-back diaries on a Friday. So as I say, thanks for joining us this morning. Let's get started then. So these sessions are all about creating some kind of thinking time. We don't get a lot of thinking time in our working week. So Friday morning, the idea here is that we kind of step off the treadmill for an hour, think about some of the things, some of the challenges, some of the priorities in our business, and give you hopefully some space to start to think differently about how you'll handle and tackle some of the challenges that you're facing as leaders in your business. And this morning I talked about developing a growth mindset. I always think of mindset as the fundamental. So it's like the foundation for really any level of performance in our businesses and for ourselves and our teams. So how we think about things very often determines what we will do and what we're capable of doing in the future. So actually mindset's so critical, because it can be the difference between people taking action and doing the right things and not. So it really is that kind of base layer of performance for me. So we'll look at how that works. We'll understand some of the challenges with mindset, and then we'll say how do we start to develop a growth mindset. And then there's some really simple coaching principles for our teams and ourselves that we'll look at as well, and then we'll open up into a breakout discussion. So I'll start with this story. I don't know if anybody's heard this story from me before. But if you have, it's a good reminder. If you haven't, hopefully it's useful for you. But this is there's an old Indian kind of folk tale that talks about an Indian chief talking to the younger members of his family, grandchildren, and he was talking about this philosophy that there are 2 wolves that live inside each of us. One wolf is good, and one wolf is bad. The good is kind of charity, kindness, self-compassion, personal growth, and all of the things that we want to foster in ourselves. And then the other wolf, the bad wolf, is ego, is hatred, anger, sometimes depression, sometimes those dark thoughts and negativity, and really focusing on the things that we don't want to focus on. And these 2 wolves are continually conflicting and living in all of us. And as he's telling this to his young grandchildren, one of the grandchildren says, "Yeah, that's really interesting, grandfather, but tell me, which wolf wins?" And the Indian kind of master says, "Well, it really is down to the one that you feed." So actually thinking about, what are we focusing our time on, what are our teams focusing their time on, really does determine what happens as a result. So the more they foster and feed negativity, the more it prevails. The same with positivity. So that's really what today's session is all about, helping us to become more aware. And I'd love to give you a chance to just drop into the chat. We've got a few comments in there already. Thank you, Fiona, for your comments already. So here's the chat. I'd love to hear in the chat, perhaps perhaps some of the behaviors, attitudes that you deal with either in your teams or with customers that you might find are most challenging. Just something that you can focus on then for this session. So what are some of the behaviors, attitudes do you see that are most challenging? And the one, when I've been in leading businesses throughout my career, the big one for me has been, people who might say, "Oh, we've tried that doesn't work." And you're trying to introduce a new initiative, and already people are starting to build barriers before you've even kind of started on a new project or a new way of moving things forward. So really starting to think about, okay, what are some of those responses we get and how do we handle them? So I've got one here. Thanks, Chris. Unsettling the status quo of salespeople or customers. Yeah, so it's kind of that inertia where there's something that's happening today and you're trying to make a change or do something different. Yeah, salespeople, and you're right, salespeople or customers very often will get stuck in what we've been doing, or customers will get stuck in what they've been doing. Maybe even the teams will get stuck in what they've been doing, and then trying to change that it can be really difficult. Yeah, thanks, Chris. Josh says, yeah, the blame game. Yes, it's someone else's fault. Yes, marketing's fault. It's the product manager's fault. It's the customer's fault. It's might even be your fault, Josh, at times. Hey,
It's never my fault. Never mind.
Yeah, that's my mantra as well. But it's always someone else's fault. It's always someone else's fault. Yeah, that can be really difficult to help people to take that level of responsibility as well. Yeah, thanks for those examples. Have those in mind as we go through the content that we talk about today. And the interesting thing about mindset, I listened to a podcast years ago by a guy called Tom Billier, and he used this analogy for mindset. And he said the people's mindset is like a fish in water. The fish doesn't actually realize it lives in water. It's just in its environment. And mindset's very often the same. The way that people think, act, and behave is so preconditioned for them, they don't even realize it's happening. So if you would say to somebody who potentially, meets everything you present in front of them with a negative comment or a challenge or an obstacle or that won't work, they won't even realize they're doing it. They'll just think that's normal behavior for everybody. And it's really interesting because it really is the analogy, the fish in water is really much like our mindset. And that takes quite a lot of awakening for some people. And so this morning we'll talk about the fixed mindset versus the growth mindset. And really we want to focus on the growth mindset. You'll have heard this analogy of one versus the other. And the way that there's some really interesting insights from psychology that I found fascinating when I first learned them. And there's a particular study done by the American Psychological Association where they put a number of people through these simple experiments to capture their thoughts and where the mind goes on default. And what they found was that in any given situation, 50% of the time, people's thoughts on default tend to go to negative scenarios. So if you present something, half of the time, people automatically default to that won't work, or there's a negative consequence, or it's going to be a problem. And that's really fascinating. So that's not intentional from people. It's just what happens. And then 20% of the time, the mind goes to neutral thought. So it's not positive or negative. It's neutral. There'll be no impact or minimal impact. And then just 30% of the time, then the mind automatically goes to positive thoughts. And when I first learned this, it kind of joined up a lot of dots for me around what I was seeing in terms of behaviors from my teams, because this default to negative is something that most people don't even realize happens for them. And actually, as leaders, our job is to start to try and make them more aware and start to move their mindset towards being more positive. And for most of us, if you're in a leadership position, you've probably already done the work on this. But not for your teams, this can be new information and a new way for them to start to think about their own outlook, perspective, and impact on other people. And of course, the mind. We talk about, I talked about it being a fundamental around high performance. People's mindset, your mindset, my mindset, our team's mindset, it affects everything. It affects their entire experience of the world, a fundamental level. And if they have a negative mindset, then they'll have a negative experience. And generally speaking, they'll project negativity. And if they have a positive mindset or growth mindset, they'll have a positive experience and they'll project positivity. But what people don't realize is that this is changeable. We can influence it ourselves, and so can other people if they choose to do it, and just kind of move away from being on default. So don't just go to automatic responses to things. And you know, I love this quote: a healthy attitude is contagious, but you don't have to wait until you catch it from someone else. You can be a carrier, right? Be a carrier of a positive, healthy attitude. And that's really what we're trying to think about today. So how do we start to seed this in? So there are a number of things you can do to cultivate a growth mindset. I've got some ideas this morning for you. So this is about kind of our personal mindset. So the first thing is to become aware. Once we know that people and sometimes we can automatically default to negative or neutral thoughts, actually to start to be aware, become more aware of when you default to positive or negative thoughts. And once you become more aware of that default, then awareness is the first step to change. You can start to make changes if you're aware of those thoughts. So awareness is the first step. And then once you're aware, the second thing to recognize is that you have this opportunity to start to change it. So once you recognize where your mind goes to on default, you can start to influence and change the way that you think. You don't have to go to default. So you start to direct your focus and your thinking towards what you want. And you'll notice in brackets it says not what you don't want. And that's because the way the mind works is that it can only focus on a desired outcome or a destination. So if I said to you, and you might have heard this before, if I said to you, don't think of a pink elephant, right, you can't do it. So we have to say, what is it we want instead? So we can't say, don't think negatively. We have to direct the mind towards thinking positively. So you might have to say, what's the positive outcome I want here? And if you don't focus in that direction, it'll automatically, your mind will follow the path of least resistance. And then third thing we can do is start to notice everyone has an inner voice. So this kind of commentary that goes on in your mind. And again, noticing that is really interesting, because most of the time that will follow the default thinking of the mind. So 50% of the time that will go to negative. And if you look at positive psychology and the field of psychology, they actually call the inner voice the inner critic. So that's the name for it. And what that means is that very often it will continually kind of critique and undermine most people by default. So what we need to do for ourselves and our teams is start to train that inner voice to become a coach, not a critic. So to ask more empowering, positively framed questions rather than negatively framed questions. And that can be a real game changer for people. Once you get that piece under control, and certainly in stressful situations, that can really help. And then the fifth thing that I found really useful. So I first learned these principles back in about 2003, 2004, when I took a neuro-linguistic programming diploma, so an NLP diploma. And they talk about a lot of these principles, but then they also talked about how the mind tends to slip back into previous behaviors. So actually, one of the ways to sustain some kind of change is to set up positive triggers in your environment. So set up reminders that help you to kind of become more aware of your default mindset. So maybe post-it notes, maybe reminders on your phone, maybe diary markers, alarms, all sorts of things can work depending on what works for you. But actually keeping this on your radar really does make a difference to how you start to change that default narrative. And then in terms of developing your inner coach, this is about thinking about the types of questions that we ask. So actually asking better questions helps us to redirect our focus. And of course, we can use this with our teams as well. So in situations where maybe there is a challenge or a new change coming, or something where people are resistant, rather than focusing on the change or the problem, saying, actually, how could this help us? Or how is this here to help? Maybe saying, what do we need to learn from this new situation or this change that we're implementing? How can we use it as an opportunity, maybe to grow more, or to connect with customers more, or to improve our service as a business? How do we grow from here? How do we use this as a growth opportunity? And just framing the question in a slightly different way can really help our teams and ourselves just to focus on where we want to go to in a lot of these situations. And then and perhaps if we have issues as we go along, perhaps this final question, what will we change next time? What will I change? What will you change? What will we change as a team next time we go through this? And these questions can really be useful, because sometimes we'll do this by default. We'll automatically do this as leaders because we're trying to move people in one direction. Other times, and I've noticed this myself, we get stuck in the negativity with our teams. So actually being able to think about the right positively framed questions can be really useful for us, because then it changes the focus and direction for us and for our teams. And then I'll just quickly, that's kind of managing yourself. You've got similar principles for managing your team as well. So you can start to become aware of your team's comments when they make positive comments or negative comments, or when they're resisting. We can start to reinforce those positive comments and positively challenge the negative comments, right? So simple things we can do as leaders. Discuss with the team what it means to have a positive attitude, positive behaviors. You can start to talk about that at team meetings and in one-to-ones. And always really trying to focus people on the direction of travel. Where do we want to go? Because that kind of helps them to focus and build momentum in the right direction. And maybe create some visual reminders to keep your team positive and growing. I go to a lot of clients and they'll have, maybe motivational quotes or stories or positive imagery around the business, and that does make a difference. Actually giving people that positive reinforcement can be really useful. And then, of course, simple thing that as leaders, very often without realizing it, we can be focusing on negative things. I'm running a leadership group at the moment, and one of our leaders who came onto the program at the first session said, there's a reputation in my office that I have that I only come out for mistakes and cakes. And we had to laugh, but because the cakes are an obvious one, but he said it's like he can't help himself at times. It's like if he sees a mistake, he zeroes in on it. And actually what that means is his team have started to associate all the mistakes with their relationship with him. And actually what he wants to do is to be praising them and recognizing the good work and building momentum in that direction. So, actually starting to have this attitude around, right, I'm going to seek out great work from my team and really praise the positive things they're doing on a regular basis. We get more of what we focus on, and so do our team. So that's a really useful kind of reflection for ourselves. And then a quick bit on coaching skills, and then we'll open up some breakout rooms. So kind of we talked about self-coaching and the questions we can ask ourselves, lots of questions we can ask our teams. How else could you look at this situation? What could you learn from this? What's in this for all of us to learn? How could this be an opportunity? How could you grow from this experience? What could you change next time? So just starting to think about the narrative, and I'll send these slides to you after today's session so that you've got them. But really starting to practice this move from, critiquing, because that tends to leave people feeling a little bit vulnerable, to really coaching and building people's self-esteem and their mindset. And that really does unlock the next level of performance. Okay, so let's open up some breakout rooms, give you a chance to talk about what you've heard so far. Let me stop sharing my screen. And we've got, we have a couple of breakout rooms this morning. So 2 rooms of 3, just an opportunity to talk about, what you're seeing in your businesses. After today's session, what else you think you might want to do, and then kind of some of the changes that you might need to make in it maybe not for you, maybe more for your teams actually. But if there is something for you as well, that'd be useful to discuss. So I'm just going to randomize the breakout rooms. I'll just create a couple of breakout rooms, give you the chance to meet your peers and hopefully have a useful conversation. Let me just even up the rooms. That's right. Yeah, good. Okay. Well, I hope this is useful. If you can, so have a conversation about this, and then when we come back, I'll give you 15 minutes. We'll go until 22. 15 minutes for this conversation. When we come back, if one of you from the group will be happy to share the themes, we'll just take that because there's learning through the conversation and there's learning from the feedback from your peers as well. So enjoy the conversations. I'll see you back here in 15 minutes. The recording again. Great. So I hope you had some useful conversations and met some new or reacquainted with some people that you might have seen before as well. So let's take some feedback. We had a couple of groups. One was Nadine, Josh, and Pretty. I'd love to hear some feedback from you. Who'd like to share some thoughts around your discussion?
I can take some. I did take some notes.
Thanks, Nadine.
I had Josh and Pretty, so two new people who I haven't met previously. Pretty a dentist and Josh working within the dental arena. What was interesting, what came out was one of them had a kind of a huddle sort of session first thing in the morning. Didn't take a huge amount of time. Was just about understanding the whole team, what's going to be happening, kind of, some of the challenges that they may face throughout the day. It is a all-female team. What was also interesting, they already have a coach. Am I correct in saying that?
No, he's not a coach. He's just helping us because we're growing, but we're kind of growing the private side with membership plans.
Right.
So he's from the membership group. So I guess in a way he's trying to help us. So I don't think he's coaching us, but it may be similar. Yeah.
He makes it easy for you. You mentioned he makes it easy for you. You has set goals in terms of, so I think it may come across as some kind of on the coaching side of things, but I think the small huddle teams that you have first thing in the morning and back end of the day has helped improve the morale within the team, the focus, being able to look at certain challenges of the day and then kind of looked at solutions and then, start afresh the following day, as opposed to taking certain issues onto the next day and so on and so forth. That's where I picked up from your side. There was also Josh, who mentioned, which was a different scenario now. Josh manages a team of 20 and previously would be in the office and now it's gone remote, I'm assuming since COVID times. And the challenge that he has, even though, if I'm correct in saying, things have improved in terms of performance-wise. You mentioned when it went into remote working, the performance improved than previously, but the challenges you have is the well-being and certain other issues with individuals, because when you're in a office environment, you get to see them, you can get to speak to them, and working remotely, it can be hidden or kept quiet, or you're just unaware. So it's being able to get that information out of the team. And I think Josh mentioned he was working on that. Because that's always the key. If your team isn't, if they're having challenges or have some underlying health issues or well-being issues, and you don't find out, then it will just fester. And that's where the negativity will start coming in and then moving on to each individual team members. So it's looking at those behaviors, and I think it's kind of getting round to that. And I think by being in this kind of session kind of group, you can learn from others.
Yeah, thanks, Nadine. Yeah, thanks. And it's interesting because that remote environment does present its own challenges around, it's all the nuances of like a working culture you just don't pick up when you're not with people day to day. So it's really important that you find other ways to have those conversations, keep people in the loop, maintain and manage that team environment and team working. It can be really difficult, but actually there's a few simple things you can do that really help to just reintroduce it and keep those relationships alive. And you know, Zoom and Teams are great mediums to be able to do that, as are, you know, structured one-to-one sessions and conversations. Yeah, very good. Thanks, Nadeem, Josh, Priti. Anything else that you wanted to add, Josh or Priti, to what Nadeem mentioned?
No, I think if you, I like the idea of having maybe post-its, or maybe having something on the wall that keeps people feeling more of a positive, and the same for everybody within, whoever, whether it's the customers or the team members, to actually have post-its or something else, a quote or something. We'll keep, because we spend so much time at work. If we have that constantly, I feel every time you're trying to go into a negative mode, because nobody knows what somebody's thinking.
No.
In the sense that, you know, if you're going on a 50% default negative, and I know myself, I've been down that route as well. Sometimes I can't get out of a problem or challenge because I just keep thinking negatively. I think it would just help to tilt it the other way. So that I like that idea.
Yeah, it's almost a reminder for you as well as your team, isn't it? You know, just to stay focused on the positive kind of goals and outcomes that you're looking to achieve. Yeah, good. Yeah. Thanks, Priti.
Sorry, if I could just add something to that, Priti.
Yeah.
And this came from my very first management role. I moved from northeast of England up to run the Scottish team, and I asked the team to do that on a rotational basis. So every quarter, it would be somebody's responsibility to put up their personal motivational, inspirational quote. So it actually meant something to them, rather than me as the leader just coming in and saying, this resonates with me, and it not bouncing with anybody. And that became kind of competition between them to come up with the best or the deepest of quotes. That worked quite well for a new team.
That's a great idea.
I think within our group, we were talking about the fact that sometimes people can be very positive to your face and then behind your back. And so I like that idea, Chris, because sometimes if the poster comes up from the boss, it's like, yeah, but look how she's behaving or he's behaving or whatever. So I think the ownership is a really good thing. And as what in our group, we talked about just having that safety net, that psychological safety net that people can express, well, actually, we've got that up on the wall, and look how you've behaved today, so that we can all learn from each other and accept and grow with the feedback that's given. So that was that. But Nigel was saying how important face-to-face contact is as well, rather than just digitally. And I know as a clinician, it's really lovely to meet someone who's not in the team, or not just the face that's coming through the door, as it were. So that really helps. But within our group, sorry, I've burst.
No, carry on, Fiona. Well handled. That's good.
Yeah. I was loving all the coaching ideas as a clinician for my own patients as well, using that to help them change habits of a lifetime as well. So picking up on negativity and saying, well, what can we do together to take a step towards your a change in your habits, as it were, as well. So but I think it's really important just to listen and watch your employees. I haven't had the choice of employees. I've just had to take who comes. So therefore, I've really had to coach that person to become within the clinical environment, and having to pick up on those slight negativeness, as it were, to be able to turn that around to be positive within the environment. I think
it does take a lot of effort as a leader, because you're not only managing yourself, you're then aiming and you're attempting to manage someone else's attitude, and that's really difficult. Coaching is absolutely the best way to do it, because it takes the responsibility from you and puts it on the other person.
And I think those one-to-ones or group meetings are really good to be able to spread the load rather than take it all on your shoulders. So so that was what we said in our group, unless Chris or Nigel have got anything else to add.
No, fine. Yeah, perfect.
Good. Yeah, and thanks for your tip, Chris. I really love that. Asking the team to come up with their positive quote or mantra or image or combination, because then it, as you say, it takes the pressure off you as a leader to be doing that, but also it's more accepted by the team because it's generated by them. Yeah, I love that. Really good. Really good conversations this morning. Thank you, everybody. And so Pretty, you said something about the visual reminder. In a couple of sessions' time, we'll talk about a principle called contracting. And there's a couple of elements to that. One is how you contract one-to-one with team members. The other is how you create what we call a team contract. And that's effectively a way to pull ideas from the team about how they want to work, the commitment they want to make to each other, and the positivity that we want to create in the culture, and then create a representation of that so that you can put that somewhere in the building. And it's like a collective team agreement. It can be really powerful. I've done that a number of times with different businesses. So I think it's 2 or 3 sessions from now we'll be covering that as a topic. So perhaps one for another day as well. Brilliant. Thank you, everybody. That's superb. Couple of things before we finish. So I'm just going to share with you our leadership model, because you might have seen this a couple of times before, but at the risk of repeating myself, this is a really useful kind of step-by-step roadmap to leadership. So it's something that I bring myself back to regularly. It's from the book Coaching Leaders, and really we think about steps, a step-by-step approach to developing coaching as a leadership style. We think about the relationship with our teams, constantly building trust and psychological safety, and strengthening the relationship with our teams. Sometimes strengthening relationships means having a difficult conversation, not avoiding conflict. It means leaning into conflict. It's a big part of what we do as leaders. And then we have to have a business plan that the team can understand, that we understand. Pretty mentioned about having goals. Setting really clear goals for ourselves, our business, and our teams is really important. Then I just mentioned about contracting. So then this model is a mnemonic. So having a contracting conversation with everybody so that they and we are clear on expectations and values and standards. Then setting really clear objectives and goals so everybody knows what high performance in their role looks like and they can measure it. Then looking at how we spend some time regularly letting our teams do their work and observing them doing it so that we've got some awareness of how well they're performing. And then from that position, we create this opportunity to coach for change. So when we're observing people doing their work, we create awareness so we can coach them. And that coaching starts to improve performance. And then the final part of the model, this H, is heroes in the making. It's about having solid development plans, having a structure for reviewing that, and helping the team to start to set goals to improve their performance and start to think about their careers long term. So we really start to help them see a bigger picture and how they can contribute more to our business. So that's the model. If you haven't had a chance to pick up the book, I would say this because I wrote it, but feedback on the book is very, very good. I get some great comments and reflections from people who are reading it. I had a message last week from a client actually who said, "Coaching Leaders is changing my life." I said, "Can I use that as a quote?" And he said, "Yes." So I need to get that onto my website. So it really is a great resource. Final thing, and then I'm going to let you go. If anybody would like to book a one-to-one session with me, a short coaching session, and a number of you have done that, so thank you for doing that. Fiona, we caught up this week, didn't we? So thanks for that, Fiona. Hopefully it was a useful session for you as well. This is a link that goes straight into my diary, so you can just click on that link. I've just put it in the chat, by the way, and that will give you an opportunity just to check out a 45-minute slot. It's an online Zoom meeting, and we'll talk about, as I did with Fiona this week, what is it you're trying to achieve? What are some of the ideas that we can come up with through that conversation to help you to make the next steps in your business? And it can be really useful discussions. Okay, I'm going to wrap up and close now because we're at 5 to 10. I want to give you a bit of a window between now and your 10 o'clock meetings. Thanks everyone so much for your active participation today, and I hope you've enjoyed the session. Hope you've met someone new, and I look forward to hopefully seeing you at a future session. Have a wonderful rest of your Friday, and I hope you have a great weekend when you get there.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank
pleasure.
you.
My pleasure.
Thank
Thanks
you.
everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Have a great weekend.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Thanks everyone. See you. Thanks. Bye.